Hello, everybody, and I'm very pleased to welcome you to our conference about historical romance and what's happening, what's going to happen, what you're doing. So I thought, first of all, I'd like to ask everyone to introduce yourselves and tell us what kind of romance you write. I think all of you write in several genres. So I don't know who would like to start. Eva, would you like to start?
Sure. My name is Eva Leigh, and I write Regency set historical romance that are very hot. And according to somebody who left a review on Amazon earlier today, and that with very strong female protagonists and male protagonists who are all about supporting their heroines.
Lovely. Okay. Shelley.
Bonjour tout le monde.
You can do it in French.
I can't do it in French. I'll just a few things maybe. I write as Shelley Adina, and I do historical fantasy, steampunk en français. And also I write as Charlotte Henry, and I do Regency romance in English. So both of them feature strong women who know what they want out of life, and in the steampunk in particular, how to subvert expectations to get what they want and achieve their dreams.
Okay, Lorraine.
I'm Lorraine Heath, and I write a Victorian set historical romance. I also have the strong heroines, have the ability to bring the hero to his knees. So that's what I like to write.
Great. So, as I said, we're going to talk specifically about historical romance. And I wanted to ask you all how popular you think historical romance is at the moment. What do your publishers say about the market? Are the new trends coming? And I wonder if, Lorraine, perhaps you could start, because I think that you've seen lots of different things in historical romance over the years and taken part in some conferences and met people.
Yes. So the thing about the romance genre is we have, different subgenres, and things seem to always be on a pendulum.
Yeah.
You'll have something that's really popular for a while, and then it kind of falls down and something else becomes really popular. But it does seem like right now that historical is on the upward sweep of the pendulum, I think. I think it's, there's kind of been like an expansion of the sort of stories that are written. As far as, I think we're seeing a little bit more diversity in historical romance, and we're seeing just different aspects of history being explored. I haven't heard anything particularly from my publisher. Eva and I have the same publisher. I don't know if maybe she has more information on that, but yeah, I think that right now historical is doing fairly well, I think.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I don't know. Shelley, do you want to?
I only know what I know from the indie side, and for years romance writers heard that, oh, historicals aren't selling, nobody wants to read them, and the only thing really that was selling was Regency and Victorian ones with lots of love scenes. But it seems that with the demise of the publishers like Signet that put out sort of the classic Regencies that didn't have love scenes and were more about the comedies of manners and whatnot, those just kind of vanished for years. But the thing is that a lot of the indie historical writers got their rights back, and they start, like Candace Hearn and Alison Pace, and some of them started putting out their books on their own and discovered that there was indeed a market for sort of the classic Regency, the ones, you know, that focus more on the sort of wit and drawing room banter and not so much on the love scenes, because some of us, it's part of our brand that the stories don't include those. So I'm finding that Regency romance, what they call it, Amazon categorizes them as clean and wholesome, even though I'm not sure I agree with that definition. They are kind of seeing an upsweep, and that's what these books are. I purposely, because it falls within my larger brand, I decided to go that route. And there are a lot of Regency romances. There are like magical Regencies coming out. And now I'm kind of eyeballing the horizon, and I'm seeing, what do they call them? The mature heroine. And granted, this has been in Victorian historicals for a long time, but it's really coming on strong in paranormals. And I can see where it will be spilling over, you know, women in their 40s and 50s and up finding love again, and the romance being about their journey. So I think that not only are we seeing an upsweep in the different kinds of historical romances, we're seeing a real difference maybe in the readership and what it wants. And I'm all for it, because, you know, I'm part of that demographic.
Yes, I think we all are. Do you think that's because the readers have matured with the authors?
Possibly, yeah. And also, I think part of it is maybe the authors are finding out that life is not over when you turn 40, that actually it can be kind of a jumping off point, and they're trying to write romance maybe for the first time. And bless them, they can go forth and do that if they want to now.
Okay, Eva.
Well, I'm kind of a synthesis of what we've been talking about in terms of like what Shelley was talking about, because my most recent book, Waiting for a Scot Like You, actually has a 46-year-old heroine, and it's also very sexy. And I have found that certain, like the beauty of the romance genre is that there's something for everybody. So if you want kisses only romance, you can find kisses only romance. And if you want very high heat historical romance, you can find that too. Mm-hmm. So it can be tailored to any taste. And I think we're getting that expansion, because it doesn't necessarily have to be one or the other. We can get all of those things together at the same time. And I think historical romance has always been, in my estimation, it might not be like the hot category at a particular time, but it's a stalwart. Like it's the backbone of the romance genre, and it never really goes away. Sometimes there's like these ebbs and flows, or the pendulum, like Lorraine was talking about, and then sometimes the spotlight is on it. And right now, because of Bridgerton, we're kind of getting this sort of a renewed moment, especially because contemporary romance has been very popular for a while. That's where it is right now. And, you know, if you're a veteran of the industry, I think all three of us are, we've seen so many fluctuations. Like now it's paranormal, now everyone's jumping to young adult. And now we get to kind of see, and now we're in this particular moment, and we're just kind of stay the course, you know, because if your readers will find you, and sometimes you'll get new readers, and sometimes you'll have readers who stick with you over the duration of your career. So it's very interesting to observe, and then you kind of have to get your sea legs and brace yourself on the deck of the rocking ship, because you're like, well, you know, right now we're up here, and then it might level out, and it's just like, I'm just going to keep, I'm going to do what I do in the way that I do it, and my readers will find me if this is what they want.
Agree.
Yeah. Two of you have been talking about writing about the Victorian era. So Shelley with the steampunk, and Lorraine with your series. So what do you think is the appeal for you as a writer and for the people who are reading of the Victorian era. Lorraine, what?
Well, for me, as a writer, one of the things that I like about the Victorian era is that it provides such a large canvas to draw on for whatever sort of setting you need for your story. Because since it went from 1837 to 1901, if I'm writing a historical romance that maybe has a darker edge to it, I can use the earlier Victorian period when you had, you know, the kind of stories that Dickens wrote. You had your rookeries and you had crowded cities, and industrialization was only just starting to get started. And if I want to write something that has just a little bit more modern flair to it, then I can go to the later Victorian era when industrialization has happened. And what I also find really interesting about the Victorian era is that there was such a change in the aristocracy. So if I'm writing stories that involve the aristocracy, there was a lot that they had to learn to deal with. Their income started falling because the world was getting smaller. You could get cheaper products from America or goods from America, and it could ship across quicker. And so there was just this whole atmosphere of things are changing. And so there's a lot you can do with it, as it just provides a wide canvas so that you can have just almost any sort of story within that world. Mm-hmm. And so I also think then for the reader, it can give them a broader story base.
Okay. Yeah, it's true. It was a very long reign. Just before Downton Abbey starts just after that, doesn't it? So there's also a link with that, those changes. So, and Shelley, what drew you to Victoriana?
Well, as Lorraine was talking about the broadness of the canvas, time-wise, that you can paint on. And my sort of interest is the narrowness of the expectations of a woman's life. And we're discovering now that possibly it wasn't as narrow as we've been led to believe, with, you know, archaeologists and explorers and geologists all being females and being able to have careers and publish, and writers, and the kind of women's lives that we're maybe in this modern day are a little more used to, but back then they were kind of groundbreaking. And that's interesting to me, a woman carving out a place in a world that was made stricter by men and controlled by men. And, you know, the place of people of color and the diverse lives that are now possible, because we're looking at this broad canvas of time, and the canvas of people's lives is also widening out. And that's really interesting to me. And also the thing that interests me from a steampunk standpoint is the technology. What the Victorian imagination thought of the future is kind of what I'm writing as the present in the stories. So these things didn't happen. Airships kind of failed after 1937, but what if they didn't? You know, could you have steam-powered cars? I mean, Bertha Benz, who pretty much invented the first automobile, the Mercedes-Benz company, and what happens if that was powered by steam instead of kerosene? So, you know, these little interesting questions about technology interest me, because I have kind of a practical side, and so I can write these into stories that include women's lives, pushing the boundaries of what might have been accepted at that time, and using technology to do it. So that's interesting to me.
Mm. Okay, Eva, you write Regency romance. What drew you towards that era?
Well, I think there's like the formulation of romance is kind of two-tiered because we have these sort of foundational primary texts with Jane Austen, and then Georgette Heyer sort of created this mythical Regency fantasia of a world with her books. And then from that, we see sort of more of the creation or development, I should say, of the historical romance as we know it. And the codification of certain rules and places, things like almacs, or like, you know, if you're going to go driving on Rotten Row or things like that, these sort of notions that are implanted in the sort of collective consciousness of what we believe the Regency to be. These are all representations of it. It's obviously not like the Regency itself. This is how, you know, the thing about historical romances is like, it's an interpretation, and whomever is writing it, their own zeitgeist and mindset is going to inform how they depict that world. And like what Shelley was saying is what's really interesting is like, because there's been this sort of homogeneity of what we perceived historical romance to be, i.e. white, heterosexual, Christian, these kinds of things like that. That was the perception. And like, we understand that that's not necessary, that's not accurate, you know? So it's like, it's the sort of filtration. Sorry, I get theoretical about this stuff, and I'm like, I'm sorry. So I think when we going back to the Regency, I think like those two foundational sort of authors have created this notion of like historical romance, and we sort of imprinted on it, and it became a very popular setting. And I think part of that has to do with the codification of like, well, when you're 18, you know, when you reach a certain age, you come out, and then you are presented to the Queen, and then you go through the aristocratic courtship rituals and all of these things. So everything is like very, in a way, it's very tidy and very organized and sort of constrained, but at the same time, which is, you know, pretty different from the extremely chaotic world in which most of us live in. And so we also get to create these people who, within the narrative of romance, they're sort of pushing against those boundaries. So it's like, how do I operate within these narrow confines of what's acceptable behavior? And then how do I break out of it? And I think that sort of tension makes it very attractive and fun. So we'll have blue stockings and rakes, or wallflowers and rakes, or dukes, and you know, and then there's also this sort of people who are kind of moving in the margin as the development of the bourgeoisie, and like, you know, like Lorraine was talking about how people are new ways of sort of social mobility. So all of these things are sort of happening because it's like the bridge between the old world and the modern era. And I think all of that creates a really dynamic space that readers really enjoy sort of delving into. And it looks pretty, you know, who doesn't, you know, it just looks nice.
Do you think the readers are reassured when they recognize similar codes from one writer to another? It's something like the fantasy world, which you were saying we've kind of created and imposed on the idea of Regency, is consistent. I think
I think it's affirming, and also it's something that we need to explore, because some of those systems that we've created aren't necessarily representational. They're not accurate. So it's like, maybe we can explode some of those ideas and open up the world which we believed it to be, and then move forward into a more inclusive kind of depiction of historical eras.
Okay. I don't even know who would anyone like to respond to Eva's
I had a lot to say. I'm sorry.
No, that's great. That's why we invited you.
I think it's interesting what Eva said, that there's this sort of pattern of familiarity. And then within that, you can explode your own ideas of what possibly might have happened, and your own characters who push those boundaries and poke at them and make them a little larger. And then the next person comes along, and here's this box, which we're all familiar with, but it's a little bit bigger. And so then we can continue to build on one another's work and make it more representational and more, I mean, who knows what was truthful, but it's clear that what has been is maybe not as it was. And so it's more fun, in my opinion. We have more grist for our mills.
Your Victorian mills, or your... Right,
those dark satanic mills.
As long as the mill owners are John Thornton, then everybody's okay.
Right.
So, yeah.
I'm watching that too right now.
Lorraine, do you want to say anything about the Regency or about Bridgerton?
No, I think one of the things about Regency and historicals in general, I've always found it's a very comfort read. And I think part of it is because of what Eva was tapped into, is that it's familiar. So there's a familiarity to it, even though we can expand it and change it. So I've just always found, when I need a comfort read, I always turn to historical. Even though I do read all the different subgenres, but it's always my comfort read. And something that Shelley tapped into when she was talking about the role that women played in the historicals. I just finished a book where my heroine does a lot of investing, and my editor had questioned whether or not she would really have been able to invest if they would have let women invest during that era. And women did a lot of investing, particularly in public works. And so but it wasn't something that was well known at the time. They just started exploring it. And so I think there's a lot of opportunity there too, to show the impact that women had, that just because they were women, it wasn't really known. It wasn't advertised, but they did have big roles that that we can explore in historicals.
You read a lot about them, you know, participating in charitable works, but you don't read about them participating in public works.
Right, yes, yeah. There's a whole book on it that I read when I was working on this novel. So I just found it fascinating, so.
My heroines invest in the railroad and become filthy rich, so there you are.
Very good.
Okay. You're all published under 2 or more names. Some people quite a lot. Could you explain why and what each pseudonym kind of corresponds to? Because I think from your point of view, from our point of view, we don't always know that someone writing in 2 different genres is the same person, but it doesn't matter if we like the book. But so how does it work from your side of the screen? Who do I ask first? I don't know if we're taking turns or...
Lorraine?
All right, I'll go ahead. So when I started writing historicals, I wrote as Lorraine Heath, and I had an opportunity a few years after I was writing as Lorraine Heath to write a young adult novel. I didn't want to confuse my readers. I didn't want them thinking my young adult were for adults, plus my covers can be kind of racy sometimes. And I wasn't quite comfortable with teens coming to a website that had racy covers on it. So I decided to write my young adult as Rachel Hawthorne. And I chose Rachel because my mother had meant to name me Rachel, and she forgot during delivery what she wanted to name me. So she named me Lorraine. But so I was writing those young adult, and then I had an opportunity, another publisher approached me about writing a pirate young adult book, but my contract with for Rachel Hawthorne didn't allow me to write for another publisher, something that was similar to what I was already writing. So I ended up doing another name, Jade Parker. And then my son and I wrote a vampire trilogy, and we sold it to Harper Teen. And so since there were two of us in that, I felt like we needed to have another name to differentiate. I'm not writing by myself on this one. I'm writing with my son. And so we just chose J.A. London for those. So it has been about 3 years, though, since I've put out, released a young adult novel. Right now, I'm really just kind of concentrating on Lorraine Heath. So, but those books are all still available. But just working on Lorraine Heath right now.
Okay. That was good, because then it seems I can understand clearly there's the kind of legal reason and also the associations, as you were saying, that you don't want the young people coming to look at the slightly racier ones. Yes, I understand. And Shelley, what about you? How many names do you have? Like Lorraine, I wonder if Eva's going to trump you and come out with 5. So Shelley, who are you?
Who am I? Oh, the eternal question. It's also, along with sort of the reader association piece and the contract piece, where the contract will say you cannot publish under this name for 6 months on either side of release day, which pretty much eats up a whole year. You also have on the independently published side the things that appear on your search results when you have everything under one name. So if someone was interested in my steampunk mysteries, they would be getting my Amish books, they would be getting my Regency romance, they would be getting my, my French translations of the steampunk all in one big lump, and they would be so confused because who are these people and what are they doing in my search list? So I split out my genres just to keep the Amazon cataloging system happy. So for the steampunk is Shelley Adina, and I stick pretty much to steampunk. I used to have young adult under this name because that was where that name began, but I have since moved it under the Adina Senft name. Adina Senft writes Amish fiction, and so everything is in the inspirational category. So my young adult books are now Adina Senft books because they are also inspirationals. Well, then I've always loved Regencies and have been planning to write Regencies for 20 years. And so finally, I was in London a couple of years ago and walking along the Thames with Bella Andre, and she said, you should write Regencies because you love them so much. And so I said, well, another name? And she said, yeah. She says, pick a name of a princess and someone from the royal family. So I went with Charlotte for the little Princess Charlotte of Cambridge. And then Henry, okay, yeah, there's a bunch of kings named Henry, but he was also my favorite rooster. So my last name is Henry.
I remember your rooster called Henry. I've been following him I was following him on Facebook for a long time. Yes.
Dear Henry. So that is.
It's also my son's name. One of my sons is called Henry. So
you have an affection for Henri.
Yes.
We were staying at a chateau in France one year at a writer's retreat, and there was a peacock on the grounds. And so we called him Henri, and he would come when he was called, imagine, because we fed him.
Yes, also. So Shelley Adina Senft, Charlotte Henry, and
Shannon Hollis used to write for Harlequin, and so now those books are back as Shanna's. There's only 5, so I mean she doesn't have a very big catalog, and she may not ever have more than 5. But anyway, at least she's split out, and readers aren't confused anymore.
Okay, Eva, can you top that?
Well, I don't think I can. I'm so sorry. But so when I initially, and also all of my pseudonyms, none of those are my actual name. So, I think we all have other names as well. So when I first started writing romance, I was writing as Zoe Archer, and I was writing as Zoe Archer for about, I'd say maybe 9 years or something like that. And as Zoe Archer, I wrote across the the spectrum. I wrote historical romance, I wrote steampunk romance, I've written sci-fi romance, I wrote historical romantic suspense, paranormal historical. So it was pretty broad, and I was doing that for a while. And then when I sold a series to Avon, they were like, well, your readership is a little niche right now, so why don't we kind of start over? And so we gave me a new name, which was Eva Leigh, and that Eva Leigh writes Regency set historical romance. Several years ago, I was approached by Hallmark, which is for our European friends. If you're not familiar with Hallmark, it's a greeting card company, but they also have they have chains of stores, and they also have a network, a television network, which runs all kinds of very wholesome, family-friendly programming, especially geared toward the holiday season. But they wanted me to adapt one of their made-for-television movies into a novel. So I did that for them. But we decided, because yes, Eva Leigh does write extremely hot, and that is very much not Hallmark's Ballywick, they decided we would go with a new pen name, just so that nobody got confused, nobody was offended, everyone was on board. So I did an adaptation of one of their made-for-TV movies, and then the Hallmark contacted me again, and they asked if I would take a treatment and turn it into a full-length novel, and it was a time travel holiday romance, and that actually was made into a television movie that aired in November of 2020, and that was pretty exciting. Thank you. Yes, yeah, A Timeless Christmas by Alexis Stanton. That's my, and I've done some self-publishing, and those are sweet, kisses-only holiday or just like romances. So I like to think that I can wear many hats. Some of them are a little more lascivious hats than other hats, but there's just, like I said, there's something for everyone. And also I think a lot of it had to do, and I sort of initially started as a kind of, I guess, quote, literary fiction writer under my real name. And basically I had chosen a pen name because it was like, basically like Shelley was saying, it was for shelving purposes, so that everybody knew what they were getting wherever they were going. So that was basically why I did it. So Zoe Archer is kind of on the back burner right now, and I'm sort of an Eva Leigh world, and we'll see where we go from there, because as we all know, this is a very, this career, if you're in it for the long haul, you have to keep pivoting. And so you just never know what's on the horizon.
Wow, yeah. Okay. And I wondered if you'd like to tell our festival readers and watchers about one of your books each, maybe a new release in French or in English. I don't know. Lorraine, do you want to tell us about,
Yes.
I think, Celui qui m'embrassa is, oh, yes.
My heart. I think it's going to come out in France. I'm not exactly sure when.
I don't know. The last one I saw that came out was in May last year, but that was The Duchess in His Bed. So, yeah, there'll be. And we knew there was another one coming, and I couldn't work out I couldn't find the information about which one it was, but that's lovely. Can you show us the cover again?
Look at that.
Not
pretty
too.
Full of my heart.
Oh,
it just came out last week, and
lovely.
Yay. So what I have, my heroine is, she needs to marry a titled gentleman in order to receive the inheritance that her grandmother left her, which is a cottage by the sea. And she really wants the cottage, because it's the only place where she was ever really happy. And in this story, there is a Duke who puts out an advertisement that he wants to, he's looking for a wife, and anyone who would like to be his wife should submit a letter listing their qualifications. So she would like him to select her, and she goes to her best friend's brother, who is the second son of a Duke, and asks him advice on what she should put in her letter. And he has always found her irritating but the main reason he finds her irritating is because he's really drawn to her. And he doesn't want to really acknowledge that. And so it's just for her to have what she wants, she can't have him. And so he knows that he's not titled and that she could never want him. And so it's just, she does discover that he betrayed her at a point. And so later in the story, she is out to get her revenge for what he did. So it's just a fun story, I think. I don't want to give too much away.
Yes, yeah.
A
lot of twists and turns. Okay, so we'll be looking forward to that, and hopefully in France this year too. Okay, Shelley, which book would you like to tell us about?
Well, with the thesis taking up most of the last year, I've been working on that and not producing new work. So it's, for me, it's mostly what's coming.
Oh, so what's coming?
Now I'm, back in the saddle, and we're going to be producing the normal 4 books a year. So the 3rd book in the Rogues of St. Just series will be coming. It'll be called One for the Rogue. So it's a Rogue to Ruin, The Rogue Not Taken, and One for the Rogue. And then I have the 4th book in the La Dame aux Artifices series, Brilliant Device, Brilliant Artifice. So that hopefully will be coming sometime late in the year or early next year.
In French?
En français, oui.
Oh, okay.
And then I have my steampunk mysteries. This is the most recent one. The engineer wore Venetian red, the heroine and the watercolor painter. So the victim and the color are always the title. But this one was based on the San Francisco earthquake in 1906, although I have it happening in 1895. In my steampunk world, stuff moves around. And she gets swallowed up by the earth, and that saves her life, actually. So that is the most recent one of that series, and I'm working on the next one called The Judge Wore Lamp Black. He was such a nice man. It took me 10,000 words to kill him off because I didn't really want to kill him. So that one's coming. And for Adina Senft, The Amish Cowboy was just released like 2 weeks ago. And it's the first in a series of 6 about Amish ranchers in Montana, which there actually are Amish in Montana. So my series is going to be the ones in Montana, the ones in Colorado, and the ones in New Mexico. There are no longer Amish in New Mexico, but there were in the 20s, so that's good enough for me. So we're going to put some back in New Mexico, and it'll all be one enormous sprawling family working ranches in the West. So okay. That's what's coming. And and I'm thinking of starting a new Regency series, but that probably won't be until 2022. So we'll see how that goes. The Fairfields will be the name of that.
Okay, so you sound quite busy.
Very busy. Get the dissertation off the desk. Okay, now we're back to work.
Okay, Eva.
Yes, well, I've concluded my Union of the Rakes Regency romance series, which is Regency set romance inspired by movies of the 1980s. The whole premise of the series of the Union of the Rakes is 5 boys meet in detention in the library at Eton College. Of course, there was no detention. You would just get caned, I think. But for my purposes, they meet in detention, and they go on to grow up and form a lifelong friendship with each other. And each of the boys who has there's the popular one, there's the nerdy one, there's the athletic one, and the weird one, and the rebellious one. They each get books for themselves. So I've concluded that series with the final book in the series, which this is the Mills and Boone cover, which may be the one that is available. It's called Waiting for a Scot Like You, and this might be the version that's available in France, but this is the American cover, so you can see. And you might be able to, you can kind of tell, but she's got gray streaks in her hair because she's 46. And it is a road story with an older heroine and a younger man. And if you are familiar with the film Ferris Bueller's Day Off, it's basically a sort of a retelling of that with the genders flipped a little bit, because Ferris Bueller, our fun-loving character, is actually a woman in this book, and she's being escorted to what he thinks is going, like what our hero believes to be, is just going to be a house party. It's an orgy. But he doesn't know that, so he's escorting her to this this house party as a favor to a friend, and shenanigans ensue on this very wild road trip that references many classic 80s films, and there's music involved and all kinds of shenanigans. And yes, it's very, very spicy, because I firmly believe that once you're over 40, that doesn't mean your sex life has to stop. So I think, and yes, the hero is Scottish. So there's all kinds of fun tropes, like there's just one bed, which is a very popular trope, and things like that. So it's a very fun, breezy, deeply sexy, hopefully affirming historical romance. And I hope it's going to be coming out in a French edition. I know that my last series has, which was The Wicked Quills of London. I think that, no, it was the, I think it's like the Mystères de Londres, or something, like the Mysteries of London, which was like London Underground series. That was in,
yes.
Yeah, that was,
I think it was Le Courage d'Aimer, the Dare to Love a Duke.
Yes, yes.
Which came out
exactly.
in January. Yes. In
I never, the timeline is so interesting, because you never know where you are in terms of when your books are going to show up, because my Italian ones have been coming in, and sometimes something comes in from like Russia, which is like which is, you know, a good problem to have. But
and
so
I think
that's
COVID, the publishing dates all changed a lot too, didn't they, with the traditional publishing houses. So yeah,
things have really changed a lot. So everything is kind of moving around, and we're all trying to get our sea legs, and we'll just see what happens. But yes, I hope that the French editions of these books will come out, because I think they're a lot of fun.
Okay. Well, thank you all very much for talking to us, and it's been really interesting, and we're going to put subtitles on you. I hope we will, that our French will be as good as your English. The information will be as interesting.
Je parle un très petit peu de français. So
super. Est-ce que vous avez un message pour nos lectrices?
I can ask things like, est-ce qu'il y a le confiture? Like, that's basically.
Okay, do you have a special message for the French readers?
Avec tout l'amour pour vous. I don't know if that's right, but merci. Thank you for reading.
Okay. Shelley, do you want to do some of your French?
Oh, ma français, c'est mauvais. Merci tout le monde pour attendre notre panel. What's the word for panel, Bridget?
Don't ask me.
Meeting.
Réunion. Conférence.
Conférence.
Oui.
J'espère de venir à Paris peut-être 2022.
2022. 2022. L'année prochaine.
2022. Peut-être. J'espère.
Okay. On espère aussi. Lorraine, do you speak any French?
I do not, other than we.
Okay. Un café.
But, really appreciate the readers, France, and hopefully someday. I've met some at various events, and so hope soon we can all get together again in person.
Oh, that would be lovely. It's been so nice meeting you. So I'm going to stop the recording. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you, Brigitte.
Thanks, Bridget. Thank you.